My name's Haley Patterson, and I'll be reading Boss of the Plains, The Hat That Won the West, by Lori Carlson. At first, settlers and travelers in the American West wore whatever hats they had won back home, knit caps, wool derbies, or straw sombreros. Some wore old sea captain's caps, others wore army hats, calico sunbonnets, Homburgs, slouch hats, or even silk high hats. Everyone wore some kind of hat, though because the weather was likely to be either burning sunshine, drenching rain, whipping wind, or swirling snow, a hat was an important protection. One hat that would come along that was particularly well suited to the frontier life. This is the true story of the amazing hat, the hat that won the West. In the 1840s, while explorers pushed on through new territory and pioneers tamed the mountains and the plains of the West, 12-year-old John Batterson Stetson sat on a high wooden stool, working along with his father and his 11 brothers and sisters at the family's tiny damp hatmaker shop in Orange, New Jersey. The Stetsons made hats the same way hatters had done for years, by pressing felt made from wet fur and wool over a wooden form to shape it. John sat at the work table and dreamed of the West, where he had heard from neighbors and talk about. Out west there were clear skies, roaming buffalo, and the promise of adventure. Everyone seemed to be going there. Everyone except hat makers. It wasn't until years later, when the dampness and steam of his shop had weakened his lungs and he became sick with tuberculosis, that John Stetson decided to go to West himself. If he wanted to see the West, he couldn't wait, so he headed to the town where the West began, St. Joseph, Missouri, the jumping-off point where the people bought gear and supplies for their journey to the gold fields. It was 1859, and St. Joe's streets were bustling and crammed with wagons, mules, pack dogs, and adventurers bound for the frontier. Determined to start a new life in St. Joe, John looked around for some travelers heading to Colorado Territory. That opportunity presented itself. "Why not come to Pike's Peak with us?" they asked. "There's gold there, and fortunes to be made." That's all John Stetson needed to hear. It was a 750-mile trip, and the long days of walking in the dry prairie air soon improved John's health. Before long, his lungs grew strong, and he hardly ever coughed. One night, the Pike's Peakers huddled around their campfire. "Sure wish we had a snug tent," one of the travelers commented. "Maybe we could make one out of the rabbit skins we've been saving." "Won't work," someone else replied. "The skins will shrink up and get hard unless they're properly tanned." John Stetson smiled. "Fur can be made into cloth without tanning," he announced. "Can't be done," the others scoffed. But John knew it could. He'd been making hats that way for years. So he spread out a blanket and gathered the dry rabbit pelts, along with a hatchet, a canteen of water, and a hickory sapling. He put the kettle on to boil. He carefully shaved the fur from the first hide and piled it in the center of the blanket. Then he sliced a strip of hide off the rabbit skin and tied each of the strips to the hickory stick. It looked like an Indian bow. Next, he flicked the bow, blowing puffs of fur up in the air to settle back down on the blanket until they made an even layer. As everyone watched, John took a swig of water from the canteen and gently sprayed water through his teeth on the fur until it matted. With a gleam in his eye, he carefully lifted the corner of the fur. It came off the blanket in one piece. Then he walked to the campfire and dipped the piece of matted fur in and out of the boiling water until it shrank into a little blanket. "Felt!" he proclaimed. "Thick, warm, stronger than a piece of cloth." It had worked. Soon John and his friends were sleeping warm and snug in a new felt tent. Over a month later, the Pike's Peakers reached the gold hills of Colorado. They eagerly went from the diggings to diggings, trying their luck. The scorching sun blistered John's face, and the whipping wind blinded him. The short brim of his derby hat, so stylish back in New Jersey, gave him no protection at all. Before long, John decided to make a better hat for himself, big and picturesque. he proclaimed, and set to work using the same technique he had made his tent. It had felt good to be making a hat again. At first the other miners teased John about this funny hat. It certainly was different from his hats back home and the ones they had wore. It had a wide brim and a tall crown. It was made of thick felt. But it worked. The brim kept the sun out of John's eyes and the rain off his back. And when it got dirty, the tough felt could be brushed or thumped to knock the dust off. One day, a horseman rode into camp. When he saw John's unusual hat, his eyes lit with excitement. To everyone's amazement, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a $5 gold piece, and offered to buy the hat right off of John's head. Delighted, John pocketed the coin. Back in New Jersey, even the finest hat sold for just $2. He grinned and waved as the stranger rode out of camp, wearing his distinctive hat. Pickings in the Colorado gold fields were slim, and after a year of digging, John had little money to show for it. But he still had a trade and a talent. He decided to move to Philadelphia to do one thing he really knew how to do: make hats. At first, he made styles that were the most popular back east, but so did all the other hatters. John wanted to make something unique, something special, a hat everyone would notice. He even made up styles of his own and wore hats to drum up orders, but no one in the city was interested. John Stetson was determined to succeed. He remembered the horseman out west, who had thought that his hat was high-crowned. Wide-brimmed hat was just right. Maybe other Westerners would like it too. Bull-whackers who drove oxen, mule skinners who led mule teams, and drovers who herded cattle or sheep. He'd make a hat for the wranglers and the cowboys of the West, and he knew just what he'd name his new hat. Boss of the Plains. John spent what little money he had left from his mining gold on materials for sapple hats. He had made them all the same: a light tan felt with a wide brim, a high crown, and a plain bland. He packed sample hats and other forms in special boxes, and so went to every clothing company store and the hat dealer in the West. Then he waited. 2 weeks passed. Nothing happened. John sat in his empty shop thinking about the gamble he had taken. He had wasted his time and all of his money. Had he been foolish to think anyone would buy his unusual hat? But then, all at once, orders began pouring in. Each day, mail brought more. People wanted the hats. In fact, they wanted them right away. And they stuffed money into the envelopes to make sure they got them quickly. John used the money to buy supplies and began turning out hats as fast as he could. At West, cowboys tossed away their knit caps, sombreros, and derbies, and in no time, John B. Stetson, Boss of the Plains, became the most popular hat west of the Mississippi. Even though the Boss of the Plains cost a cowboy a whole month's wages, it was worth it. It shielded a cowpoke's eyes from blinding sun and caught the rain before it trickled down its back. It could wave cows into a corral or fan the flames of nearly lit campfire. It could be used to carry oats to feed a horse, or it could scoop up a refreshing drink of water at the cold mountain stream. It could impress a lady on a Saturday night's dance, or it could come in handy when the sweetest huckleberries were ready to pick. It was the perfect decoy when a cowboy was in trouble, and it made a soft cushion for the cowboy's head at the end of a hard day. Westerners laughed about this hat they liked so much. They often said, "It gets so you can smell it across the room, but you can't wear it out." John B. Stetson had become an important part of the great American adventure called the West. Others had done it by striking gold, blazing trails through unknown territory, or taming a wild land. He had made his mark with a hat.